Okay. Now let's start with the official announcement. Good evening, my name is Nick Hill and I'm Chair of the Climate Action Committee. Welcome to the March 3rd meeting of the Climate Action Committee. Under Governor Baker's emergency order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, GLC 30A S20, issued March 12th, 2020, and in effect until the termination of the emergency. Meeting of public bodies may be conducted virtually, provided that adequate access is provided to the public. On March 29th, 2023, the remote public meeting provision was extended through March 31st, 2025. As a reminder, this meeting is being recorded via Zoom and will be uploaded to the town's YouTube channel for publication, later viewing, and administrative purposes. With that said, first item is to approve minutes of the last meeting. Any motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second. Okay, vote, Cameron?
Aye.
Michael?
Aye.
Roger? Okay. Oh.
Aye.
And the chair votes aye. Okay. So one thing, speaking of that lovely introductory spiel I have to read, that came up, if this hybrid meeting law expires at the end of this month. And we got a memo from town manager's office alerting us to this fact, that if there are no changes to the law, we can still do hybrid meetings, but the select board's requirements for remote participation are much stricter. And I won't read the whole 4-page memo, but basically they require advance notice and a good reason to participate remotely. I did notice that the last time they approved the extension was March 29th, so I'm sure the legislature will do something timely and approve an extension on 30th of this year. If it comes down to it, I'll send out what the requirements are for remote participation. And we'll still have public remote participation. And now, moving right along, the embodied, Needham Power Choice.
Yes, I don't have a lot to update folks on, just to say that the Needham Power Choice program will officially begin this month with the first meter reads that folks have in March. We got a significant number of questions in the beginning of February leading up to that first deadline for folks to opt in, opt out, or opt up. But then after that, it's been pretty quiet. So I'm sure that when those next round of bills come out and folks maybe see Needham Power Choice on their Eversource bill, there'll be some questions, but knock on wood, so far so good. It seems like a smooth process, and the plan, I believe, is that we should have numbers for enrollments across each of the different program options by the middle of this month. So we'll get those from our consultant team at Mass Power Choice, so we'll be able to see what the breakdown looks like for our community. So we'll see like how many people opted up to 100% green or opted down to basic, etc.
So when you say with the March meter read, so the bill that I get, let's say in the middle of March will reflect. Is the clock start ticking? Whatever I'm using now is already under Needham Power Choice, or is it
You'll see in your April. bill
oh, okay,
Needham Power Choice.
okay, so
I believe you should.
it's the meter reading. It's the period that starts with the March meter reading.
That's my
Okay.
understanding. Yeah, and then just depending on when your meter read happens in the month.
Okay, gotcha.
So the enrollments have all happened and they will be able to tell us within a couple of weeks what they are.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, they're just,
You'll get those to us in between. We don't have to wait for the next meeting.
Yep,
For
yeah,
you to see that.
absolutely. There's a lot of folks who are eager to see what the breakdown looks like. So yeah, happy to share that with everybody.
And I think that'll be something to help us calibrate what we're doing with outreach on the 100% green. And, from the green Needham hat, we sort of didn't get very far with the outreach I'd hoped for. We have been putting more cards out, and I think we'll be doing more outreach, especially once we have some numbers and push on that, that long slog.
Yeah, I agree. I think it'll be helpful to have the numbers and give some more direction. But yeah, I mean, I know a lot of folks I talked with on the phone, at least who called me, seemed aware of the fact that there was an opt-up option. So I think word is getting out. Hopefully we'll get even more folks aware of that as well.
And I'm correct that you can change your option at any time.
Yes.
By
Yes.
calling the service number, yeah.
Yep, you can call, you can go on the website. Yeah,
It may be a lag.
of another bill.
Depending on,
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, but you can always change that.
Do you have any idea if there'll be any information on what the delta is?
Between the
As a result.
Eversource price and the,
Yeah, like if you had stayed versus opting up, is there any way to get information on what the delta was besides doing the calculation with the amount of electricity being used?
well, so the calculator that's on the website is the best tool to compare with pricing. So Eversource prices change every 6 months, so we'll continue to update that when the prices change. But the best way to do a comparison would be to enter in what your usage is for your kilowatt hours from your most recent bill, and then you could see the comparison for what that cost was. But yeah, that's the best way.
It might be helpful to tell people, but
Yes, yeah, I always push the calculator to when people are like, how do I know how much this will save me? That's really the best resource.
we need a TikTok on it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's another social media strategy.
But it'd be interesting also, and you could do the math once the reports start rolling in of just what Needham is saving both dollar wise and carbon wise.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great idea. I can talk to Mass Power Choice about that.
And we. Oh, Artie, now that
I already,
you have your hand up?
Hey gang, no, hey gang.
Oh,
I've been sick the past 3 or 4 days, and so and what's funny is we have a large house review meeting the next floor above you in the select board's room, and you're down below, I believe, in the basement. But I'm not going to anything live right now because I've been sick. So I'm just listening in.
okay.
hope you feel better.
Thanks, guys.
I guess that's your cursor on his.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay. Anything else on Needham Power Choice? And now well, we don't have Stephen Frail with the Embodied Carbon Working Group. he decided to check in with town council to see if it had to meet public meeting law. And is still waiting for a reply, so unfortunately.
Yeah, my understanding is as long as the working group has fewer than a quorum of the appointed committee, so in our case it's 6, that folks should still be able to meet. So if there's other people in the working group who are not on the appointed committee, that should not count towards the 6 of our.
Yeah, because I think he's got it as a volunteer group.
Mhm.
He's the only one on the committee on it.
Oh, yeah, then that's what we did in the large house review committee. We formed a working group to study the different house size, in this case, starting with non-conforming lots, and it's around 6 people, and we're about a committee of 14 people. Maybe it's 5 people on that. We're a committee of 14, so it doesn't fall under. I do not believe it's falling into the open meeting law as far as I know.
Okay,
I mean, it doesn't stop it from having a meeting, right? I know he has that
No,
meeting.
we still,
He
there's
can
still
do a
meetings.
meeting. Worst
Yeah,
they
there's
do
still
it.
meetings. We have reports back from the working group every night, every meeting, every meeting, which there'll be another formal report tonight, what's going on.
okay.
So. And on the EV group,
EV group, yeah. So we, I did make contact, AJ and Paul and I chatted briefly a couple of weeks ago and talked a little bit about charging, the role of charging, and we did find some help through some people through Concord, which is actually quite helpful group through which called Energy New England. Have we worked with them before?
I hadn't, no, that was a new
They work
name
with-
for me.
They work for Concord. They do they do contract work in terms of helping towns develop websites and information hubs for learning more about EVs. They actually helped us in our EV event 2 years ago.
Oh,
Yeah, they were sort of helpful in that regard. They had people who asked other people to bring vehicles. And they make their money off of consulting to
mhm.
try to help towns create awareness and then how to initiate programs, EV programs in your towns, and then target what they want to do. So the first thing she said is like, you have a goal, like, what do you want to do? And, there's lots of goals. She pulled up the data on Needham, which is that we have 1,126 EVs in Needham and 678 plugins in Needham, which is a little lower than the surrounding towns like Lexington and Wellesley.
What were those numbers? The full EVs were how much?
Full EVs, 1126
Yeah.
and 678 plug-in hybrids. And we were sort of like, per population, we're like a little lower than Wellesley, a little lower than Lexington, but it's all on the government website, so we can actually pull up.
and that's a current,
Yeah, right this year.
oh, good.
Yeah, and we doubled in the last 2 years.
Yeah, we did.
People bought EVs, so, which was great. And they did a survey of towns, of other towns, not Needham, and the vast majority of people plug into their own homes. The
Yeah.
vast majority of these towns. So the issue really came down to, what is it we want to do? Not only to service EVs that are not residential, but how do we encourage EVs in the future, especially amongst people who don't live in residential and can't plug into their own home.
Mhm.
And so that's when we started talking about availability of apartment complexes, what's out there. And so you started doing some digging around, right? Yeah, and
Yeah.
so I thought we'd want to share with us some of that information.
I do have your slides. if
Yeah.
you want me to pull them up.
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I see. Paul sent this to me.
Fabulous.
Helpful.
Awesome. I just did a little digging. I just did a little bit of a drive around Needham, just to a couple different apartment complexes that had a good amount of units. I think that my criteria was above like 75 units. So I put together a quick spreadsheet. I used some data from the town website,
and then drove around. Basically, what I found was that there weren't too many EV chargers at these places which had a lot of residents. So I think like Charles River Landing had the most with 7. There's 2 outside and then 5 in a garage.
Mhm.
And then a couple other places had like 4-ish charging stations. So it was a little interesting to see how big those places were and how few charging stations they had. And just driving around the parking lot, there were very few EVs that weren't in a station charging. So it's probably pretty limiting for people that live there, given the small amount of spots.
And those are all new.
Exactly, and then I also did a little bit of, I went to a couple other kind of older places around town, and those places had 0 EV charging. So the newer places have a few, as you said, and the older places have none at all.
Yeah.
And those are places where decent populations of people are staying, so.
Can you refresh with when you were just driving around, the ones that had the EV, were they full of cars charging or were they iced? Meaning that regular vehicles were parked there or they were empty or a mix?
It was mostly occupied by cars that were charging, that were EVs.
Okay.
There was, I mean, out of the 13 I saw, there was probably 10 that were actually being used.
Mhm.
And then I didn't see too many other EVs just in other parking spots not
Okay.
charging.
Mhm.
So it seemed like there was a very small amount of EVs at those places.
I see.
So is this list, just based on like what you were able to find for multifamily housing and you, oh, cool,
Yeah,
okay.
and I have a Google sheet. If you scroll down, there's like probably. there's
Oh,
probably
I
more.
just, sorry, I pulled up the slides, I didn't pull up the
Oh,
Google sheet.
Yeah, that's fine.
Just-
But on the Google sheet, there's probably like 10 or 12 more that have like 2 or 4 units.
Okay.
But these are just like the ones with more than 4.
I
units.
see,
Okay, so it's
Okay.
90% of the,
Right.
gotcha.
And it's interesting that you find this because, you know, the state passed a law in November called Right to Charge, which basically gives a tenant in an apartment or a condo to have access to charging, which they can pay for, which means that if you have access to an outlet that you can service to upgrade for like a level 2, residents can either pool or on their own get a higher level charging if they wanted to within the limits of the facility and the ability to actually do it. You know, like if you were to put in a level 2 charger and it would cost the owner of the complex X amount of dollars, it may not be considered reasonable. But the right to charge law is in effect, it's utilized in Cambridge and other towns now, you know, for these purposes and just came into effect in November. So,
I haven't heard of it.
yeah. neither did I.
Do you know, Paul, if have the regulations like been promulgated for that? Like I remember seeing that
Yeah.
when they were looking at the legislation, because I guess it wasn't clear to me if that is like fully in effect at this stage, or if they will have to promulgate regulations to support that.
Yeah, it's a good question. I got the impression, I mean, when I looked at the sheets, I sent you this stuff as well. And some townships or communities are utilizing what it says. I think Cambridge has sort of moved ahead, but they tend to do that anyways, you know, so. But I think it's still interesting to know whether or not it's actually implemented in generally, you know, so.
I can reach out to Cambridge and see how that is going with encouraging folks to move forward with that, because if there's a way to support some of those multifamily buildings with adding chargers, it would be great to have some resources for that.
I think we talked about if we had a unit that had already at least gone to the effort to install units, EV chargers, how did that happen? Why did it happen? What did it cost? And, you know, trying to sort of get into the heads of the people who actually did that would be interesting to do, I think, because it's a process.
Yeah.
And it's expensive, you know, it's not cheap, so I think it's not just dropping a line, you know, so I think.
I would
that,
also see if you can figure out who actually manages them,
Yeah, it's at the town.
because I know many people with EVs that live in apartments, they can't charge at home. They only have a small window when they get home.
Right.
At 5:30 to plug in, if the spots are taken.
Right. Right.
they're out of luck.
Right.
And
Yeah,
they have to find another place to charge, and if the spot's available and they get home at 7 or 8, and they plug in, they have to go back out at 11 or 12 o'clock to move it.
Yeah.
Because if you leave it all night,
yeah.
you'll pay $20 or $25 a night to park
Mm,
and get charged up.
mhm.
Whether you take all the electricity or not, you're paying for the amount of hours that you're plugged in.
Yeah,
So someone's getting all that money, and if you have an EV, you're spending 20 or 25 bucks every single day to charge up. And so then people are like, why would I do that? And they have to find another way. So I think part of that conversation is really who owns it? Who's getting the money from it? And is it really a benefit to the people who live there? And is there another way to handle that? Because I think it becomes really cost prohibitive for folks. There's only 2 or 3 stations and they get home at 9 o'clock. They're not gonna go out at 2 o'clock in the morning, and move their car.
Yeah.
But that's up to the people who put it in and the business
Right,
where we
right.
interact with.
Right, right, right.
But it's an interesting thing to talk about, maybe recommending, I mean, if I ran an apartment building, I would do something to say, if you're plugged in at 1 o'clock in the morning, you can stay plugged in. Because frankly, it's insane to make someone go out 3, 6, but you shouldn't be there, like, if you go to the standard charging places, right? After you finish charging, or you get
You
the hour.
shouldn't leave
limit,
you
have
shouldn't
to-
leave it there
No,
for 8
but
hours,
if
yeah.
you do it for, if the company that's running it, actually, they can charge you, right? If you stay there past the hours.
Mhm.
Right, I mean, we could be an apartment complex and have somebody running for us and not have any of those conditions, you could have all the conditions. Or you could pick one of the big charging companies, they might say, hey, these are our options, take it or leave it. But it's up to you as the building owner, you put it in. How to
Right, but
do
I'm
it.
saying, if we're gonna, I'm going back to the original
Yeah.
concept, which is encouraging people in the future.
Mhm.
To encourage people in the future, you've gotta make it accessible and cost effective, because so far I've known 4 people that had this issue,
Yeah, that's
and
crazy.
2 of them unloaded their car,
Wow.
because
Yeah,
Well, that's crazy.
why
It
would I
just-
spend that much money
It
doing
makes no
that?
sense.
I don't want this car anymore, it's more of a hassle than it's worth,
Yeah.
and that's a sin, right?
Right.
Like, why would you do that? Because, so you gotta find a way to make it beneficial, easy, and long-term user friendly.
But that issue is easy enough to resolve by requiring that, after a certain hour, there's no requirement to unplug, because it just makes no sense to say, oh, you have 3 hours
Well,
and
yeah,
you can
but we
plug it.
don't own the property.
No, I know, but but this is something we can talk to property.
Right,
owners.
that's what I'm saying, this, like, if
That's
we're
what I'm
gonna think about it, we've gotta
That's-
fold that into the conversation. so
I don't
that
see
it's
any other, as I
beneficial.
think about other things, I mean, they might have chosen a partner who charges more, than they feel like they
That's
should.
right.
That's up to them too, but this one seems like a real
Sometimes,
problem that you could
sometimes
easily-
somebody else is
you could-
running it.
yeah, right, you
So
could easily make
the
sure they know.
The apartment owner's not running it.
Right.
Somebody came in and is
Right.
servicing it and doing it. They're
and that's
making the
their
money,
standard.
And that's their standard, and they're not gonna
Right.
benefit from that one way or the other. So anyway,
It's
just,
kind of a dumb standard, so maybe we ought to get right on that one.
just a thought.
Well, no, I think engaging one of these places, to be honest with you, I think is the way to go. The one that most chargers, or amongst the most chargers, got a lot of experience with this, like what went well, what.
Right,
went
what do you
poorly,
do?
And we, I think that I asked the EV people that we contacted, and I said, have you had a lot of experience in serving as a go-between between charging companies and municipalities? And they started doing something with Braintree, but don't have a lot of experience with that, so we're kind of on our own here,
Okay.
trying to understand what people are doing out there. And I'm sure that if you go to all those gray examples up there that say yes, they're all probably completely different experiences, but that's okay. I think we're here to learn, and I think we should engage. Does anyone have any idea, do they know anything or anyone about any of those at the top that would be a first stop for something like this? Or, because I don't know.
It's not
We gotta know
necessarily,
the management, whoever's managing
That's what I mean,
it, but
you
yeah.
know,
one thing, as a sort of a broader research thing to go to the Chamber of Commerce, where you can get builders, particularly in Newton and Watertown, where you've probably got more multifamily construction, just to sort of say, well, what goes into your thought process on this? And other than it's expensive and we need to do it up front, but
I thought you were going down a different path.
But take
Yeah,
me
right.
there.
I was gonna say, the first thing that would be, seem to me to be to connect with who are the building managers at each of those buildings,
Okay,
right?
but what does that got to do with us? What are we trying to accomplish
So
with
this-
that?
so
Because
this
to me,
gets
what
back-
we're trying to get to is, what is this town gonna provide in terms of, I mean, I thought you were going down a path of the Chamber of Commerce. You go to the Chamber of Commerce and you say, how much are you willing to invest in a certain amount of EV chargers, because people are gonna come to use your charger during lunch, and they're gonna shop in your
Which
store,
is-
they're gonna buy your
No, it's
food.
different.
But that's actually, that's a very good point as well in terms of, getting beyond the multifamilies of engaging the business, developers
So this-
basically. and
But
land-
that's a, I want to start a second
These are two-
discussion.
But
these are
that's,
two
they're
prongs.
separate,
These are
yeah.
Yeah, these are separate. Let's,
One is sort of a public charging approach here, which there's also support for, and then this would be sort of like, how do we create more
Zoning.
availability in apartment complexes for people to charge, and those are two different
they're
things.
different, that's, we were starting, I don't want to
This
jump
is-
to another
this is-
discussion.
I was starting with this because I thought that if there was any group of people that had difficulty charging, it would be these folks.
I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
But I think we, rather than jumping over, because we had this conversation about public charges at businesses,
Yeah.
this is a very good thing to do. And to me, the next step would be to find out who the building managers are. Let's just find out what they're doing.
Right.
Because to your
And
question,
I
what do
don't
we want to
disagree-
do?
And I don't disagree with you, but what are we seeking? Are
What
we
we're seeking is to
them
understand best
volunteer to do-
practices.
Oh,
Best practices to encourage and
Yes.
support residents in multifamily.
Right.
Right, that's what we're trying to find out. Are there good practice? We just found out from you a bad
there
practice.
is. I don't know.
We wanna make it easier.
I don't
for
think you have to
people.
call places to do that. I think you can find that in general development.
I'd rather,
And
I'd
beyond-
rather speak to the
But
individuals.
these
who
are, these are
actually
people who are
gone
really
through
doing
this.
it live on the ground in our
That's
Oh,
what
town.
I-
understood, but I
Okay.
think what they have, okay.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm just
But-
saying, I think there's straightforward development practices that everybody uses, and for every X amount of beds, they provide X amount of parking, and of that parking, they do X amount of EV, and then they track to see if their tenants are frustrated that they're not getting, like, again, people that I know, apartments, buildings have installed more EV chargers because they're tracking how many people in their building have EV vehicles.
Right.
And when it becomes a frustration and people say, I'm not gonna live here because you don't have a parking spot for me, then they add some more.
Right.
But it's,
But that's good to know. I mean, if you have an insider who can get us insight into that, that'd be very helpful.
Yeah, the EV folks
think we
here
can
who
do
run
that.
this business, didn't seem to have an inside track to that information either. They gave me the impression that this was much more variable from place to place, and which means that, I don't think there's sort of a
I'm
set
not sure.
standard at this
Okay.
point, I wish there were,
Well,
but I can.
Well,
I
for
can ask
new,
her.
for new development,
Yeah.
for multifamily of a certain size, with the specialized code, they'll have to have
Yeah.
20% of parking spaces
Right.
Mhm,
be EV charger ready.
mhm.
But for existing multifamily, I agree, like I think it's a hodgepodge, like we don't have something to hold. people.
there's obviously no consistency, right? I mean, those numbers aren't,
right,
Right, if you go to the last slide, I took a picture of the size of the garage.
Yeah.
And the amount of chargers that were, one more slide. So you can see the size of the garage on the left, and those are all four.
Oh, yeah.
Chargers in the garage.
Hmm.
So, I mean,
Can you see the company name on the charger? Is it?
I tried to look, I could not.
Okay,
I mean, I can
I
tell
think
what
like-
kind of chargers there are, but I have no idea, like I
Yeah.
have the same charger but I have no idea who's taking care of those things.
Right.
Yeah,
My point in saying that was, I mean, this is clearly not 20% of the.
Right.
response.
Yeah.
no, but that's a very new requirement, so
Right, right.
that's, like, we'll see that with, new development moving forward from 2020, October 2023. But I think it would be good to have us have some information to share with other multifamily properties of, like, this is what other folks are seeing in terms of best practices for installation. This is like the number of spots other folks are offering for number of residents to chargers. I think it would be helpful because we are gonna miss a large segment of multifamily property right now. Like new multifamily will get them with the specialized code, like they'll be swept in with that, but everyone beforehand, it'd be nice to offer that as a resource, I
Yeah.
think.
So the question becomes what does it take a place, let's say like the apartments by Rosemary Lake? What are their barriers? Is it just that,
Cost.
It's cost.
but, or it could also be
I
that,
mean,
that there's no demand or is nobody, what else is beyond, yes.
Well, they would be, if cost wasn't a prohibitive factor, they would install more chargers and allow non-electric cars to be in, use the spot if
That's
if
correct.
they needed to. But I think it would be helpful to know, what does it cost a company that runs these charging venues? What does it cost them to install a new space? What does it cost them once they have run the lines already to at least one charger? And then, see how expensive, because that's gotta be the barrier.
Because NASA supplies funds for this.
Yeah.
For
Ah.
if you apply.
Well,
And the funding, is up between 25 and 50K per installation.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's also, it's back to your point, you're giving up a space. It's gonna cost you a lot of money to install it. The people who live there may or may not have the car, so you gotta build it in order to invite somebody who has the car to come and live in your building to park there. If they're not parking there, you're down 10 sites, 10 parking spots,
that's expensive.
and that's hugely expensive for them, so it's a chicken and egg situation, so. Figuring out how to get them to a place where they can be subsidized in some way, or benefit for them to install it. Especially if it's a retro, is the only way you're gonna get them to do
Yeah.
it, because there's no upside for them.
well, for the retros, it's gonna be idiosyncratic as to how much it costs, right? So in new development, you can say pretty much, if I do it, this will
Right.
cost. But there's an upside to them if they find people in their building saying, I want one, right?
Cameron has her. hand
Oh,
up.
Cameron, Barry,
Wait a
and then
The subsidy was kind of what I was going to ask about, because our goal is to install EV charging stations at places like apartment buildings. But what do we have to offer? Because we're talking a lot about the cost that the apartment complex is going to handle, but what are we going to do as a town to help them out, and what can we offer them? Gabby, do you know what we could offer them?
And the only thing we can offer them at this point is information. So sharing with them
Right.
what the rebates are, how they can take advantage of those. And I think what we're talking about, like some of the best practices that we're seeing in other communities. I don't have any funding to offer them, unfortunately, from the town side, but I can point them to other funding sources and provide like guidance, I guess, on applications, but that's really the extent of what I can offer.
Okay, because yeah, I kind of agree with going to the different complexes. It's kind of a moot point with the best practices, because each apartment complex, it looks unique, and so I think it would probably be better just to look at websites and see what the general guidance is, as opposed to individual best practices. I've done best practices before, and they're just, everybody's different, and it's hard to consolidate them. So good to know that there's not much we can offer.
Barry?
It's early.
Oh, sorry.
Just a personal experience. I spent a month in DC, living in a 20-story apartment building, and they had, I think, 2 charging stations. I have a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid. There's a company, Blink, I don't know if you've heard of it, BLINK.
Yeah.
So you go to the management of the apartment, it said you have to deal with them. You have to download their app.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you have to go through the internet. So when you hook up your charger, you have to connect with Blink, and then they charge you. You have to put a certain amount of money in the account. I still have $10 in there. I don't know how to get out. I couldn't figure out a way even to contact them. But I suspect a lot of these apartments might be working
Yeah.
through this third party.
Probably true.
Because the other third parties that you just basically, you stick a credit card into, right? I mean, you just pay for it.
Right.
So
Right.
they don't know that's the thing. Some of them are really bad, and that sounds bad. I would not want to contract with them. I mean, but some of the ones that are out there, the EV America, the other ones.
They were very
A lot
happy.
of
They
them
said,
do.
we don't have to deal with it. You just
Yeah.
contact them.
That's a very standard thing, because then if it
Mhm.
fails, they're
It's on them.
responsible.
Yeah.
If it fails and your guy comes to complain to you because they can't plug in, you say, I'm sorry, it's not my problem, I don't run this. I mean, it's completely.
You can,
It's like
at the same
the-
time, you can
it's
choose
just like
someone
the
who actually
laundromat.
makes it easy for your people to use it. Right.
It's no different than your washer and dryer.
Absolutely.
You have a
Exactly.
card, somebody else deals with it.
Right.
Well, I think that what you've done though is that, you've laid the land for us here.
Yeah.
None of us had any clue like what was out there. So you sneaking around
Sure.
town and I assume you weren't followed around by police.
Sneaking around.
You know,
Escort, no.
You did well, and so legally it went well, and so then, and now I guess we'll just have to think a little bit about, as our little group decides, how we want to approach this, and then, my personal feeling is to contact one of these complexes through the management, find out how they went from sort of nuts and bolts and, start to finish, about how they did this and why they did it. Kind of curious, and I'd like to know if they're like, are they having experiences like this was described where people don't have enough space or time to charge, or there's no room to charge? Like, what would it take to expand that? What's the obstacles to that? I think those are all really important points, and
I would also suggest you go to the big people who do it. Like go to the Avalons, the Revingtons, like the people who have 50 buildings in the state of Massachusetts, and they are doing it, and they know why they do it and what the benefit to them is. There's
And
a
they know
couple
how
of
to
people
go.
I think I can call to get to that,
That'd be great.
because they know what they're doing, like, and they do it for a reason. So to your point, there's a better way to do it, but it doesn't mean they are gonna do it. But it goes back to your point, the only thing we can offer other people is best practice in other locations. So I think if you called like a Revington or an Avalon or some of these larger apartment complexes that do it all the time, both in garage and at grade, we could document who does what, and then call these people, ask them what they're doing, and then say, by the way, do you know that your competitors who are getting
Yeah.
their renters are offering something better?
Yeah.
And then they may be incentivized to do something differently, but
I mean, one of the things that might come out of this is that we provide a clearer path for how this can be done successfully, because it sounds like it's probably most places do their own thing.
yeah.
And if you created a model for how to move this in a more streamlined approach, that would be a nice finishing project that would then our town could offer to any apartment complex. So that's something to sort of shoot for as a goal.
This is really nice work, though. This is
Great.
adding to it. You can't work on a goal until you have an inventory for what your present state is, so you've just added to the inventory.
So we're less than 1%.
But now we know that.
So that's,
No, I think this is excellent. Like, this is, as we were saying, like, this is new territory for us. So-
Yeah.
And as Cameron brought up, the only thing we can offer people is information, so let's give them the best information that we can. So yeah, I think this is excellent. It really-
You've got people who want to do something, let's help them do it.
Yeah, yeah. Make it as easy as we can. at
excellent.
least.
So just before we leave, though, we had the 1126, we believe in the pre-covenant, the overwhelming majority of people, because they live in single family residences, will put it in. We're not hearing any issues about doing that. It's pretty straightforward, because that would say then we don't have to worry a lot about at least people wanting to buy their own cars. So they live in a house and need them, not doing it because they feel they can't. charge. So I guess what most people are gonna do, they're gonna buy a car and live in a single family home, you're gonna solar charge eventually or before.
I don't know if I could answer that question. No one's coming to me at this point and saying, hey, I'm having issues installing a charger at my home, or I'm not gonna buy an EV because I don't want the hassle of installing a charger at my home, but it's also possible they don't know I exist, so that's why they're not coming to me. So I think we probably need some more information on that to figure
Well,
out. that
we
is
do
not-
know, I mean, again, I'm not sure we wanna go through this, but we know who the people are. I mean, we have the information.
Mhm.
You know where the cars are registered. You could reach out to people living in those homes and ask questions. I'm not saying we should necessarily do that, but we have the ability. This is one of the things that's actually tracked, because you know exactly who owns all the cars or where they're registered.
Do we know that?
Oh, yeah.
in detail?
Oh, yeah,
Yes,
you can get that, it's public,
absolutely get
This
that.
is-
public
Yeah.
information.
We're not gonna do that.
No, I'm not just, I'm saying,
Not
there's the ability to do it, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
You're not gonna do it.
I think it would be interesting to know if that is an obstacle.
I mean, I think that like in Concord, for example, this company services the Concord EV site. So like,
Mm.
got a question about an EV, comparing prices, need to install a level 2 charger, blah, blah, blah. There's a phone number you call, I called it,
Yeah.
and the next day they call me back.
Mm.
And then they tell you, let's get with your problem, you know,
Gotcha.
so that's how that works. But it's a fee they pay the consulting company to
Mhm.
administer this process, which, you know, some towns can do and others do
Yeah.
not, you know, so it's
The
interesting.
advantage of having that
And they-
be there
Yes,
to
they do.
maximize
Oh,
that.
yes. And that's where it comes out of, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a nice benefit.
Okay.
Okay, well,
That's
thank
all we
you.
got so
That's
far.
great.
Yep,
Yeah,
That's
thank you.
a lot.
That's a lot, yeah.
There's a lot.
Get asked it.
Okay.
Great job.
Win-win.
Yeah, it's just me driving around, had one side, just ask if the doorman, and then
Yeah.
the door. That's
It
illegal.
wasn't too difficult.
No.
Yeah,
Right, you could do it.
I didn't know we had doormen.
They're out there, I guess, huh?
So now we're on to the roadmap.
Yeah. So we have two categories left. Clean energy and natural resources and waste that these are the last two categories that we have not discussed yet. So I just pulled up a list of the actions and then I took a first stab at trying to organize these based on what I thought the order might be, but I welcome discussion on this because
I liked it a little bit bigger.
yeah, I was gonna say, I have some of it all in one, but I don't think it's gonna work, so I'll have to do it in sections. So
That's great.
let's see,
Thank you.
let's do
Yeah,
it
thank you.
for,
Thank you.
and then you have
And
pen.
that was fine.
Okay, so our first two complete.
That's great.
So maybe I'll just slide over for this, and then we can actually see the rest. I won't be able to see them all. Oh, it's close. We can almost see them all. These are the remaining 5.
I think my only I guess starting, having worked on the two solarized campaigns that we did, it's a lot of legwork. Unfortunately, the second one we did got interrupted by COVID.
Still did it.
We still did it.
We did it.
We did it, and the nice thing, I mean, solar lends itself to remote analysis. I might suggest that I mean, they're both ongoing. The outreach for the aggregation is something we've already started. It's an ongoing, it's maybe a lighter lift than a solarize.
But it doesn't feel like it's gonna do, we're already doing the municipal aggregation, right? We're already focusing on trying to do that. We have a plan. We, ask people to talk about opting up. This doesn't feel to me like moving the needle further. Feels to me like if you want to move the needle on more clean energy, you want to do one of the other things, because we're
Yeah.
already working on number
It's
4.
really more of a subset of, we have an aggregation, it's
Yeah.
it's a maintenance item. maybe.
Because we did have an outreach program for the launch. We have social media graphics for the program that we can continue to post, like once a month as a reminder for folks, for example, but I don't have like a formal campaign plan for what that will look like to continue outreach outside of that. So if that's something we think needs more energy behind it, I think that would be good to
I
discuss.
think it'd be helpful to talk about each of those, what they would take and whether we think they would be worthwhile, because it would be nice to prioritize those. I personally wouldn't leave, number 4 to me is something else. Okay,
Yeah.
I don't feel like this is clean energy. No, it is, but we're already working on it.
Mhm.
So I would
Yeah.
ask, do any of the others make sense for us? The next point, okay, I remember long ago, we did both of these, okay? And I remember doing all the work to set up Solarize. That was when the state was supporting. It is a lot of work, requires a lot of volunteers. So I don't know, you know, a formal Solarize or even an informal Solarize it's a lot of work. Okay, so that we need a lot of volunteers. Number
Yeah.
5, identifying sites to solar storage on public property certainly would seem to me to have value, because that's about, and we did some of that. In fact, town didn't act on it, but we did it a few years ago where we looked at parking lots. At Quinlan, you know, we actually went through parking lots, and we've come back to that with that and can provide that back to, I think I did actually, I can't remember.
I do have that,
Yeah, you
yeah,
have that, right?
yeah.
That to me makes a lot of sense, because I think there are a lot more sites, given that solar is basically now often the cheapest form of energy to install, right?
I think what's hard about that though is that it's gonna be limited, like the Solarize, we could reach a much larger area than what we have for public property.
Well, I don't know, because if you think about the RTS and how big that, I mean, that's a big site, right?
Yeah,
But
I
how
don't
many homes you need to do, so, you know, but this is a question is, part of the identification is, are there opportunities? And are they sizable? If they're not, then you've learned something,
So
but we
Artie,
have a lot of sites.
Artie had his, Artie?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I just want to get this out there now, because I know what sticking points there were last thing in 2019. That was Liz and I have been talking about starting this spring, doing a Needham Go Solar thing again this spring. So I just want to get this out there now. We haven't decided whether we're doing it tonight. She wants me to do another one in Needham, so I just want to get this out there now. Anyway, that's all. Because it runs on top of the Solarize thing, so I know what fun we all had last time because that going on. But anyway, I want to throw it out there now, just so you know. That's what I've been. Liz and I are talking about doing that again. That's all.
Maybe Artie knows the answer to this question, but outside of these Solarize campaigns, has there been a steady increase in solar application in houses, and like how is that sort of taken off enough already that we don't need to do Solarize campaigns, or because there's a steady increase, or not? And I don't
Well,
know.
that's certainly, part of what's going on. I mean, people have kind of, in some ways, people have, I don't know if they'd say they've had it with some of the Solarize and how many of them are even going on around the state these days, type of thing. Because there's an awful lot of places out there now where people fill information and all of a sudden you fill in the wrong site and you have 10 companies calling you, you have 5 quotes coming online. None of them are done very accurately, but that's what's happening. People are getting all this stuff. And so it's lacking a certain education, but they're getting a lot of bids and a lot of prices.
But I mean, are more people putting solar on the roofs now?
Oh yeah, of course. No, of course, there's certainly a lot more people putting solar on the roof. It's certainly slowed down some. I suppose right now there's so much uncertainty going on. But it's certainly slowed down some. And the catch-22 is the higher electric rates make solar more attractive. And so let's say that's a catch-22. We don't like these higher electric rates. The higher gas rates even make solar more attractive. But it's one of those things where we need to. One thing that's really bothered me to a very large extent is that I know we're pushing to electrify more things and so forth. And I used to spend a lot of time with people finding ways, what can be done to reduce the electrical usage. And I don't think there's enough of that going on these days. And the only proof I have is that I see houses all the time. Some houses do a really good job being efficient, energy conscious, and some just don't. I mean, it's just, maybe it's just a different lifestyle. It is what it is, but just sometimes I'm just scratching my head.
Are you talking about plug load and just general use, or are you talking about the efficiency of the envelope?
No, just the general usage, not the efficiency of the envelope, the efficiency of I don't mean to phrase it that way because I guess I say the style of the house, the usage profile of the house, not the people in the house. Not the house itself, but the people in the house, the usage profile. And sometimes I just scratch my head. I mean, I've to some extent, I've almost given up trying to educate people about it, but every now and then I'll catch something obvious when we talk about it. but I look at the baseline usage and sometimes I don't understand where it's coming from, besides people not being more energy conscious. I mean,
We
you know,
need
there's the
some
phrase that the,
This goes back to
it's,
educating
yeah.
kids and parents.
I mean, the cheap, you know, the most cost effective, what, penny, I forget how the phrase goes, is the one you save or something like that. But, you know, we're,
Right.
we need to find ways to save energy, to have less waste, phrase it that way, which is, there's too much, there's
Yeah,
gotta be too much waste going on out there.
So I'm wondering if we can, or how much we're already collecting data so that we can measure progress on a goal like this. And the thought occurred to me, would Eversource be able to tell us how many homes in Needham they're paying smart payments to? I mean, would it be easy for them once a year to tell us how many rooftop solar arrays there are in our town? And is there any way to aggregate what the total residential electricity use is in a year?
Eversource has all this information, and when we were doing this over the years, we ran, you know, save campaigns, we ran reduce energy, do mass save, do all this, and of course, they wouldn't give us anything, right? So the question is now, are we in an environment now where we have a town committee, we have a town commitment, could we get something from Eversource? And that's a question I would absolutely want to ask, because we got nothing from Eversource. They have all this information, they refuse to give it to us, even though it's our information, right? It's the usage of the people in this community. They wouldn't give us a thing. So I would put that forward as something to think about, because if you want to be able to measure and figure out we're making progress, it would be helpful to have it. We know they have it, they just don't give it to us.
Yeah.
They consider it private.
No, they're
information,
just,
or-
they're very siloed within themselves and
It's old style.
in their attitude against the world.
Whatever the reasons are, there is an opportunity because the town, because we have a formal town function, we have formal town goals. There is certainly a lot more leverage with the select board and the town going to Eversource to say, we want to have a conversation about this, than there ever was for Green Eden to do it.
Okay. but
Yeah,
let's-
guys, I have to jump off to my other meeting that's about to start. But yeah, I'm glad I said something. It's just the usage is driving me crazy. What's happening? So if we could do something to find some way. I mean, I'm not talking about not changing from gas to induction. I think that's there's so many things that are incredibly worthwhile, but there's energy being wasted. And I would love to find a way, because in order for us to have the energy in the future to do this with, to make a difference, we have to find some way to reduce the waste. Anyway, I gotta go, guys. I'm sorry. I gotta go.
Thanks, Artie.
Thanks,
Artie.
Artie.
What were you about to say?
Education, that's what that's all about.
And
I think I can get the information.
Do you?
Great.
What exactly do you want to get? Our office has done work in town,
Mhm.
electric wise.
Yeah. I was gonna
I
say,
also think if you're an electrical engineer and you say, I'm looking for the town's blah, 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 I think they'll give it to you. I think there's
Yeah.
other ways to get it.
Mhm.
I mean, you know, even the things that they've done, you know, they do basically, you know, the energy assessments. They know how much they've done. When we did formal programs with Miss Green Eden, we had those numbers, right?
Okay, what
Well,
exactly do we want?
I know a way to couch this would be to say, we want to know how, we're trying to advocate for more electrified houses.
All electric.
Yeah, all
Yeah.
electric, and we'd like to know, you know, what we're, you know, how fast this is growing. And, you know, because your job, you gotta keep up with the demand that we create when we do this. And it would be good for us to know whether we're creating a monster when we
But like,
do
what
this.
you worry about, Couch?
What do you want?
I
You
think,
want townwide energy use?
I think I want number of residences with solar installations.
number and usage.
Number and usage, yeah.
That's
As
Number and
But I think
capacity.
the overall energy use
Yes.
of the homes in the town, how has it changed? You know, how many mass save?
Right.
What
Because they do have that. You
Yeah, I
can
know they
say
have, but
from
they have all this
2000 to now, you'll see how it's.
Right,
moved.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think the key thing is going, whether it's a solarized campaign or an education campaign, we need a baseline, just like we do with the chargers and what's the baseline in terms of Needham's energy usage
Yeah.
and solar production, and how has it changed in the past 10 years is really what we're looking at.
I was gonna say, DOER does publish a record of who is getting smart payments.
Yeah.
So I can't recall the frequency with which that list is updated, but
Is it
That's
still
another
updated? I haven't seen it
resource.
updated in a long time. I haven't looked recently.
it was updated in 2024.
Okay,
But
that's good.
I couldn't tell you like
And
that
it
was like
gives
a
you
once a
the-
year update or.
Did they break that down by town?
Oh, yeah, it's broken
Yeah,
down by
you can-
town,
you
it's
can see
broken
by
down by
physical-
residents.
by
Like you can
system owner.
see.
Yeah, that's how
by
we tracked solar for the longest time.
Yeah.
That's how I tracked solar when we did with Green Needham.
But
You looked at the DOER report.
It's
Yeah.
by system size and not
Yes,
not
exactly.
production. It'd
It's
be
not
interesting to
production.
see, because I think a solarized campaign really, it goes back to what you had talked about in the past about an electrified campaign or
Yeah.
a decarbonized campaign.
Mhm.
To Artie's point, that we can all sit there and yell at the kids for keeping the fridge open, but, in terms of wasting less, decarbonizing, using energy smarter, which includes a solarized component.
Yeah. No, I think you could definitely roll in solar outreach with Electrify Needham, like, I think that would be part of it. I do think it would be good to have numbers for comparison. The only other idea I had was working with the building department to look at permits and figure out if we can backtrack it that way.
We also talked about that and tried to do that for years. It just, it was the mechanical part of dealing with the building department. They didn't track things easily.
No,
But what I couldn't understand is how you could not do that, because you had a building permit to install, electric, to install it. The
yeah,
information was there. But nobody was,
yeah.
But if it's part
I
of a
think
larger
that's-
permit,
Yeah.
that's part of
but it's still there. The
It's,
information's
it's there, it's just not, it's not in a like easily sortable way
Yeah,
is the
that could be the
problem.
problem.
And I think, there's been a conversation about trying to make some changes to the way that a lot of that information is categorized, because there are other departments who are interested in that as well.
Is it all
Um,
on computer or is it paper?
Now it's all on computers,
But
but
as
the
of
old
when?
old records no.
Yeah,
So there's some improvements to be made, but that's the only other way I can think. But Lynn, if you have some connections, I would be so curious to hear what you're able to find.
I fully understand the need for a baseline. Could someone articulate, once we get the information, how does that advance? Goal?
I think we need a place to start when it comes to tracking impacts of the campaigns. Like, I think that's one piece that I would find useful, is to understand, like, if we do a solarized campaign one year and, these are the 5 strategies. It's a way for us to measure if we're having
And 100 people.
success.
But then we have to know what the strategies that got us to the
It's-
baseline.
No, really, I mean, part of what you wanna know, like, you gave us the numbers of how many solar installations, right? Being able to track that over time just says, well, if people are installing at the rate of 100 a year, maybe we think that's great, we don't need to do anything else,
Yeah,
but we need to know.
yeah.
So it's not just about campaigns, but if you have a baseline, you can start to see, right? I mean, if you're seeing energy use go up without a lot of new buildings, a lot of homes being built, remember, we're totally built out in this town, right? We're not adding 1,000 new physical homes, we're just replacing homes.
I just caution, you always have to, when you're requesting data, you have to understand what you're going to be using this data.
Mhm.
So just
Yeah.
collection of data is valuable, but you need to anticipate in advance what you intend to do once you get the data.
Yeah,
Well,
I think we need to have clear benchmarks when it comes to meeting our end goal for solar and Needham, and I feel like I don't really know, like, at this point, what to suggest for how many solar installations we wanna see in like
And-
1 year, 5 years, like, I don't know yet.
I'm just throwing emails out to people. I just got like quotes back of what it takes to install all these things for you. I'll send it to you.
Uh-oh.
But I guess, to the point, one of the things with you know, if we do a solarized campaign in the past, we've gotten 100, 115. If we're getting, at this point, we're getting 100, 200 installations a year just through organic factors,
Yeah.
that might put some weight.
Right.
And or similarly, in terms of number 5, to move us along, you know, if we have a rough idea of how much, you know, what's available on public property, then that gives us
Yeah.
to be able to go to the select board and say, not just we want more solar and storage on public property, but over the
Here's
years,
where you could go.
we've done some various numbers and it looks like there's,
Yeah, what I'm trying to get at
300,000.
is you look at these, why I'm asking the question is, our job, I think, should be to look at these 5 and decide which ones do we want, right? We're the kind of oversight, which ones do we want to move forward on? We
Yes.
talked a lot about 3, and we're gonna talk about getting some data to decide, because maybe we don't need to do anything.
Yeah.
I'm there for it. Number 5, that's why I asked. I think I would like us to look at that so that we can see, are there a bunch of sites that are potential, both buildings and not? And knowing enough to be able to say, hey, wow, there are a lot, let's go advocate for it, or no, it's really complicated, there aren't a lot, let's not. And I would like us to also, us as this group, before we leave this permanently, to have the same conversation about the other 3. How important are they? Do we need something to determine that? Because we want to figure out which of these are gonna be high on the list, which ones maybe next year, but that should be our job.
Yeah.
I know we get into talking about not waste, right? Let's do that.
I was wondering whether the town has done any geographic information service mapping of what public building solar sites, you know, what square footage there is, or.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just said you did that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, we looked at, not at everything, we looked at a bunch of sites.
there've been a couple of things
Yeah.
done, because someone else with Green Needham did it before you guys looked at parking lots. What's her name? But I don't know if the town has anything.
One of the things we
within-
didn't get to was looking at other sites, and asking about, I mean, there's the buildings, right? Because we know there are buildings that could potentially have solar renovation, you know, whatever. But there's also basically open sites to say, is there opportunity for ground mounted solar? Obviously get more complicated there, right? Because we have land that's got trees or not trees, or
Yeah.
other things, all that. But we started to have that conversation to say, wow, there's a whole bunch of land down by the pumping station, right, by Natick. We actually
So-
looked at that with Hank, there might be some,
At-
that's the kind of question to ask, is there enough of this to make it worthwhile saying, hey, this merits further look, or by the time we look at it, we say, no, there's
You're not gonna find.
Well,
big enough.
I should add for this one, 2 things. One, whenever we do a roof replacement, what we're proposing with our building decarbonization roadmap is that there will be a solar assessment done every time we do a roof replacement. And then the second piece with this, is and this is in the sustainability manager's report, but we just recently found out that we received that MAPC award that we had applied for to develop a municipal parking lot solar guide. So that's gonna do a review, they'll do a review of all of our parking lots, and they'll help us put together kind of like some guidance on how to evaluate which sites have the best potential for solar canopies, and like work through issues of like drainage, siting,
Yep.
So-
PPAs versus ownership. And the hope is that we could take that and then other municipalities could use that as they're investigating that issue too.
So,
So it'll be a good resource to
That's
support this
enormously,
one.
that will be enormously
And-
helpful.
Yeah, hopefully move the.
but so in terms of these goals and in terms of things in the end that we are recommending to move forward on, it sounds like between the volunteer work that's being done, what you've got, the MAPC grant, the decarb policy, that we've got a good cluster around identifying sites. And that's also something that is within the realm of town government and the select board to say, you know, this is a policy.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Identify and move forward. with sites.
Maximize our potential.
Optimize.
Yeah, and by the way, the roof replacement aside, I've worked with Hank on this for a number of years. Every building that we have significantly renovated or rebuilt has been built to be quote solar ready. So he has considered the loading and weight of solar,
Yeah.
because otherwise you run into, oh, I want to put solar on the roof won't support it. Right? So even the ones we haven't done, the new buildings, the renovated buildings have been done with that in mind.
Is
And that's
there-
great.
Is there a parallel path when you look at number 6, because that whole feasibility of where you're gonna do a well field and everything that goes with it, is there a parallel path going with this under like, to what you're saying, Michael, a minute ago, like a policy thing that goes with that, like, the town should be telling, you know, whoever is redeveloping Muzzy, however that ends up, it's gonna be a giant parking lot, and underneath that parking lot should be
Right.
geothermal wells, because that's where you're gonna get the biggest bang for your buck. So
Exactly.
how do you get the parallel conversation happening that every time someone comes for a building permit, you say, how big is your parking lot? The town wants to partner with you to X.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't think that conversation is happening yet, but I think that's a good idea, so I think we should discuss it more. The other piece I wanna emphasize with this is it is networked geothermal, which would involve multiple properties.
Yeah.
So I think it's something we need to investigate.
But I would add that to the list, because I think that is pretty.
That's a,
I know that he has started to fund some small grants for communities to begin investigating priority neighborhoods to identify like good candidates for network geothermal, but aside from that, I'm not aware of any other outside funding to
But
support
the
that.
Muzzy site might be big enough to.
No,
to
you
count
don't
as
even need a
as
big site.
network.
You don't
But-
even, well, to do geothermal, you don't. get it.
but we're talking, you know,
We're talking
in
network
this
Well,
case,
make a
and
difference, it needs to be decent enough size, I mean,
we did
That's
a,
true, but
25 wells is.
I believe that,
You can really do it.
the clean end, the buildings working group, I think they looked when we were putting the plan together, for example, at the housing authority and the school and kind of looking at public
Right.
properties for a network system, and they concluded there wasn't really the density.
That's tough.
it wasn't
To
even density, it
do-
was just the complexity of going
Yeah.
across that road, it just made it so complicated, right?
Yeah. No, I think it's a tough issue, and I think whether it's networked or not networked, I think we need to have parallel conversations
But
happening
it would
about
be, to your
geothermal,
point, it
but
would be good to have that looked at. We have one geothermal building. I've also put out, it is the most trouble-free building we own. I
Right,
said that multiple
Yeah.
that's
times.
right.
yeah,
So, it isn't just about networked.
yeah.
You can do it anywhere.
No,
I mean,
no, I.
we
agree
would have
with-
looked at it at Everett Road, frankly.
But it's also a big enough lot to accept it, to handle that building with
Mhm.
geothermal. I mean, how many wells are under?
I mean,
I don't know
50
how many-
for-
No, not.
For PSAP?
Wow,
Because it just, you
Yeah,
didn't
it's
need
only
it for
10.
people. We
So-
just basically.
10
just
wells?
was
Oh
PSAP.
my
Yeah.
God,
is this a,
holy moly, that's not,
you know, something that's
But it-
more
yeah, it's unbelievable.
in terms of looking at a public building policy that, or is it in, you know, that we should be looking at geothermal or?
I mean, I guess I'm less concerned about it for our buildings, because I think we have really strong advocates for geothermal, like when, especially we're just talking about the maintenance piece.
Yeah.
Our building maintenance director is one of the strongest advocates for geothermal because of that maintenance benefit, and same thing with building design and construction, we have very strong advocates for geothermal,
But
but
as a
outside of our,
town, but outside the town, we're kind of
outside of town, I don't know.
limited in what we can do.
I think it's a similar conversation what we we're having before, like we can share information, we can point people to details about the incentives that are available for going geothermal, but
Does anyone know a resident who has geothermal?
yes,
You do?
there are a few residents who have
Yeah,
geothermal
they
now.
were amazing.
Yeah. Now that Dandelion is.
That's a more,
moving in.
Do you not have any idea what it costs an individual residence to do?
A lot.
it's a lot, you have
It's
to
a
think about
lot.
it. It can work very well for like for a building, a large building, you know, because
So
remember, you have no cost other
Okay.
than running the pumps.
we have much more items to go through because we could We
So-
could dive down that
But
well.
before you
Michael.
leave that,
Did you
7
have
and
some-
8, okay? I mean, are those, do we know what we need to know to decide if it's something we should keep on our list for now? That's my question for both of those, just so we finish assessing them all at a first pass. I have no, I mean, that's what microgrids everybody talks about.
Let me look at 8 relative to this other conversation.
Mhm. I mean, we get a report from Eversource every quarter on our gas leaks.
Yeah.
We have meetings with Eversource monthly to talk about pipe replacement. I do not feel like we have an electrification plan with Eversource. I think this is heading and I think that's my understanding of 8 is like, that's what that one's really heading in the direction of. And I don't feel like we have that with Eversource right now. I put this at the end, to be honest, because I think this is going to be extremely challenging and it's likely that outside factors will
Yeah.
drive Eversource in that direction even more so than what we can offer as a town. But I'm totally open to hearing other opinions on that. So if folks read that differently, please tell me.
I think it's important. I agree with you that it's a longer term, even when Eversource has talked about, their load mapping, that they can't give us a heat map of, for example, can I electrify a house in the middle of X and such street? Because, they did do some general conversations with the CAPC a couple of years ago, and that was good,
Mhm.
but that may be a longer term internal push than something to say, yes, we're gonna, because it's more amorphous.
Yeah, I mean, I felt like that conversation, my impression was that conversation was more about like, what is our potential to continue to electrify homes? Like, do we have the capacity? It wasn't as much of a conversation with, how can we move Eversource's current processes of like continuously replacing pipe that's failing to instead think about alternative solutions like network geothermal, for example. Like, I don't think that is happening.
No, I
right
mean,
now.
this one was more in the terms of just the working relationship and, we did get, when we wrote that goal, Eversource hadn't even
Hmm.
told us, well, this is what it looks like, and they did come to us and say, well, we project that except on 2 cold nights in January, Needham as a whole will be fine
Yeah, and I
in
think that's
2050.
helpful, but that's also correct me if I'm wrong, that's the electric side of
Yes.
Eversource talking to us. Yeah, and I feel like talking with the gas side is sometimes more challenging. But it's important, it has to happen. So just so I understand, it sounds like maybe 5 should be switched with 3. Is that right? Like, I just want to make sure I'm hearing feedback on all these, but I want to understand where they are for re-ranking.
Well, three is, we're gonna find out, are we doing well enough now, given the amount of work it takes? We're gonna probably get some more data, that at least to answer the question, maybe we do not need to do this, because it's happening.
Yeah.
But companies like Hardee's are doing it, right? Number 5, I heard that what I was advocating for is I think we need to work on this so we can bring it forward or conclude that no, there's not enough opportunity.
No, I think 5 is,
It's separate.
well,
But
no,
that's everything.
5 is to identify sites. I think that we've got pieces to put those pieces together. I think 5 is probably our next priority, in my opinion. 3, we sort of shove things down a bit. 3 is, we're still in, do we need it phase.
Okay.
Okay. And, 4 is kind of a subset of,
I feel like I would get it out of there because we're doing it somewhere else. That's distracting from this one to me.
So move forward.
it's a subset, it's really a subset of maintenance on the aggregation,
Okay,
which looking at the plan, it is actually.
yeah,
And so,
Given the interest, I'd like to keep 6. I have, 7 and 8 sound like they stay elsewhere.
say it later. Okay. All right, great. That's all I want to know. I just want to make sure I move these in the right places. Okay. Do you 717? We have to do natural resources, which has more. options.
Well, let's start it at least.
So I'll just say for one, this item was recommended in our FY 25 CAPC recommendations to the select board, and this became the development of the tree preservation planning committee, which is going to start meeting this month, I believe.
It's first meeting is Thursday.
Oh, there you go. Thanks, Fred.
Okay.
As our designee, I appreciate you chiming in
Well,
on
and
that.
Artie's on it as well.
Right, yeah.
Excellent.
And we've got somebody else from the Conservation Commission on it, so.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's good. So it's not-
Three present and former Conservation Commissioners.
Excellent. It's good, good voices represented. So I just want to make that note so that people know where that one stands. Since that was a recommendation that was made previously by the Climate Action Planning Committee.
Is not to jump over, but since 3 is related, is 3 gonna be considered part of that, or is that separate? I
So
believe separate.
3 is there's a warrant article in this year's annual town meeting to fund a tree inventory. So
Excellent.
assuming that goes forward in May, then this would get funded.
So we'd hire a consulting
Yes.
company to do that.
Exactly.
Is that a
Fantastic, excellent.
That's great.
warrant that's supported by the select board? Has that not come up yet? Or-
I'm not sure. I'm not sure if it's.
But I guess if it's a warrant, then if we're looking at FY 26 things to recommend,
Mhm.
I can probably find that out
Or
on
May.
Thursday when we have our first meeting.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the question
Thanks,
is that a
has a select
warrant
board.
as opposed to, what is it?
I believe it's a warrant article, and I don't think the select board has.
Well, but presumably
It's
they,
it's included in Kate's budget, so. I would
Okay.
assume
yeah,
that-
so, but
Yeah.
it's not, this is not an outside one, this was
Yeah.
the first case, so they're gonna discuss it and they will take a vote on whether to
Yeah.
recommend it.
yeah,
Right, but
Yeah.
it's
Okay.
there.
I don't think it's been like a formal presentation, I guess.
but it's not something, I mean, it sounds like 1 and 3 are things that are
They're already.
Right,
moving
in
which is
along.
play, and we're not going to be recommending, or, the tree is a previously stated priority.
Mhm.
Okay,
Well, they're underway.
Two, because
fine.
they should be
So what
close
about
together
two?
because they're kind of related.
They're
or-
related. Yeah, we could do that.
I don't know, it's just, they're related.
They are very much related.
And then really 2 and 5, well, no, they're not.
Can we just talk about them and give us your assessment of what you think they mean and what you want us to think about? 2, 4, and
Oh, for
5?
2. For 2, we have not done, to my knowledge, anything like that before, but I think it's a great idea. For looking at our waste stream. Yeah, we haven't done anything like that. I know we've made huge strides with schools because of the food waste program and the trays, but
Mhm.
I couldn't tell you in depth what that waste stream looks like right now.
We did it actually once years ago at the schools, we actually did, and we did some
Oh.
assessment with the folks at the RTS of measuring how much recycling came out and garbage, we did that for a while, because they have all that, they carry the stuff away. So I don't know whether that just isn't being done anymore, but
Well, I guess we had those numbers. I was thinking more like, are we tracking, are we reducing like tonnage
Right.
for that every year? Like that one, I mean, I guess we have the numbers, just a question of someone doing the analysis.
it'd be curious to know, because maybe we are already
Yeah,
reducing our waste.
yeah, I mean, food waste program and the trays, we're definitely gone way down.
Oh, yeah.
But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, yeah, I don't know, I could ask Matt about that.
Well, and related to this, they just finished a survey, the RTS
RTS.
just finished a survey, so
Mhm.
are they thinking about some change in their strategy, based on the survey, or do you know?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, that will impact how we choose to move forward with the use of the RTS or looking at curbside programming but I don't think the results have been released yet, to my knowledge, but that's gonna be a big discussion with the select board.
So the RTS could be shrunk in size
Yes.
or wow.
Mhm.
I see.
Could work differently, could do different things. The waste's not going away though.
Yeah,
Oh, no.
or it could stay the same, yeah. For. I don't know that we do this yet. Maybe we do and I'm just not aware of it.
No. Well, I tell you we don't, because I remember a couple years ago, we were asked by somebody who wanted to, in town, oh, can we do something on that? I think we gave them some information, but there's nothing going on that's a program.
So is this for individual
public or is
residents or
this
is this for like landscapers or both?
I assumed this was public, but. Like, I
Oh, for
I assume
public
this was,
buildings.
I assume, oh, I'm sorry, I assume this was for like residents, like the general public, that's what I meant.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it's the overall goal is public and private landscapes are designed to be climate resilient, manage stormwater, maximize tree canopy, promote community resilience and carbon sequestration, so it's definitely,
I mean, like some towns have eliminated use of certain types of motorized
mulch.
landscaping, gas powered.
And certainly there is a committee and we're working on that here.
Right.
there's a warrant article on that.
Mhm. Similarly with the public outreach campaign for waste, I know Matt has worked with Amy to do like updates to the website for the RTS and news blurbs and news you need them, but I don't know that there's necessarily been like a targeted campaign for waste reduction,
Yeah.
unless again. that's
But
something I'm just
there's
not aware
also
of it.
almost no, well, I'm saying education, virtually no one in this town has any clue about solid waste master plan or the fact that in the next few years, it's gonna cost us a lot more to get rid of our trash. I mean, there's education like that that I think needs to happen because going back to your, not just number two, but for the number five, people need to understand what's gonna happen to them in a few years when the landfills in Massachusetts fill.
Hmm.
My comment to the, on the RTS survey was, I would love it if you would make as transparent as possible where the garbage is going when you take it away. Cause I want people to know where is it actually going
Going to
into it?
Millbury.
It's going to Millbury. That gets
It's
incinerated.
being burned.
It's being burned.
And how clean is the burning?
In Massachusetts, it's pretty good
Okay.
because we have pretty
It's a
good,
regulated
it's
facility.
a very regulated facility.
All right.
It's actually very, very well done.
So there's no chance that our garbage is ending up in the ocean in Southeast Asia or something?
no, we're breathing it.
Well, your
Just
technology.
see like-
Now, our
your
recycling,
technology
well,
is.
well,
see
no,
like-
Your old
electronics.
iPhones
Well,
are, but not your.
there is actually, the RTS does work with, identifying who the people
So-
that they have to take away the e-waste. right?
Yeah, there's electronics.
And that's really
collection out there.
important because you don't want it ending up in a pile in Southeast China somewhere. And that's very valuable.
So that gets right to the point of number five in terms of, and maybe
An
that
outreach campaign.
feeds into the results of the RTS poll.
So do you think five should be higher?
I should move up.
I mean,
Okay.
five should move up and maybe be coordinated with,
Well, 1 and 3 are coming off technically, right?
Well, they're
One of
underway.
yeah, they're
How-
underway.
They're
Going to the-
starting.
Going to the end, because it's already happening, so
Mhm.
5 should come up.
and five is something to collaborate with the RTS.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Because it's definitely something that they've gotten people thinking about
Yeah,
trash, so. I like the idea of what happens beyond the yellow bag.
For number 5, when it says educate, is
Mhm.
that just like a flyer or what does that kind of mean?
We don't
I
know.
don't think we know,
We have no idea.
I think it could be anything, probably, definitely some print media, but I'm guessing like.
If you want to
That's-
reduce waste,
Creates
people have
more
to be
waste.
motivated.
Yeah,
Yeah,
People have to be motivated to do it, and there's plenty of information out there that will motivate people to realize it's gonna cost them a fortune, it's gonna cost them even more, and it's harming them to have all this waste, so we wanna reduce waste, but we haven't.
The original motivation was to hit the throw, was the yellow bags.
Yeah.
The more you recycle,
Yeah.
the
yeah.
more you reduce the
Right.
waste, the less yellow bags you're gonna buy.
Mhm.
But
And that's-
it also begs the question, is that stuff really being recycled?
Are the things that are in our recycling stream. I mean, we have some of the lowest levels for contamination in the
Yeah,
state
we are
because of the
right.
way
We
that
are
our system is set up.
Is that right? And
Yes.
and
Yeah.
that's, and when I look in one of those bins, it's not very clean.
No,
But-
there is, you would be shocked by what happens in other communities.
I-
Because this is
okay.
something Green did, we did education around it, we had several events around it. And one of the things Matt was able, we've been able to say for several years, working with the folks who do our recycling, we have among the cleanest recycling to
We
get.
need it, we need it.
Because what happens if it's too dirty, if it's basically too contaminated, it all
Fill it
gets
with
into the
trash.
trash,
Yeah.
all of it.
Yeah.
And this is the fact that we do separate like paper from plastic from metals, like that in itself leads to lower levels of contamination.
What
Which makes
percent, I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I was gonna say, just for us, it makes it easier for us to get haulers to take that material when there is lower levels of contamination, and then as a result, we to pay as much.
I keep hearing that only 5% of recyclable plastics really get
Correct.
reused. So what happens to our plastics that in that commingled stream? Does anybody know?
So there's only certain plastics that can be recycled at the RTS, that's true, but I feel like,
It's like 1 through 5 or something.
Well, no, it's actually, they're fewer than that. So we did
So-
Green Needham did a program, we brought in the folks who do our recycling, and actually, you can probably still find it for our site. I think the video of it's still available, where the Casella folks talked about it, this whole process, okay? And that's why the clean part's important, what they separate's important. The reality is that plastics 1, 2, and 3 are the only ones that really get recycled. Black plastic's a total disaster, even beyond black plastic, 4, 5, 6, and 7, you can forget about. 1 and 2 can often and are often recycled, and that's why they do that separation. It's probably a higher rate for a community like us, but if you look at all plastic, no, the rate's really low. Because recyclable doesn't mean recycled. That's the reality.
So does the stuff they can't use get burned in Marlboro?
Burned or thrown away or whatever, Millbury.
Yeah,
Millbury?
yeah,
Okay.
I feel like hearing your question is up right, it might be interesting to have Matt come and chat with the group, just like we talked about having Kristen come, our emergency
Yeah.
management administrator, and she did say she could join us for the April meeting to talk more about some of the resilience and public health sections. I know people have questions about that, but it might be nice to have Matt come and talk to us, because I think there are other things that are probably happening that maybe I'm not aware of yet, and Matt would be able to answer some of these questions. in
I think
more
it'd be
detail.
real helpful with some of these waste questions, and then it might coalesce into climate action, sort of
Mhm,
getting behind what he's doing.
agree. I will ask him if he can join us for a meeting.
Fantastic. I appreciate
And
that.
so rather than being a straight priority, it becomes sort of a support
Yeah,
priority.
yeah, exactly. And I think with the RTS study, like we were saying, there's gonna be some big conversations happening about how we approach waste in Needham, so it would be good to get in alignment with that.
Just based on what Michael said, does the RTS site need to be updated, or the Needham Public Works site need to be updated? Because it says we take plastics 1 to 7. But if we don't,
I would have.
I
to
think
defer to
take it
Matt
just
on
gets
that.
thrown away.
Yeah, I don't.
But that's the way the oil industry is trying
That's
to
how they're making their money.
bamboozle us, right? You know, they wanna perpetuate the myth that it's all recyclable, and it ain't. So, I mean, I think our site should reflect what the reality is.
yeah, I think that might.
Let's
The
ask
problem
Matt,
is this
because I don't
reality
wanna,
is
I don't wanna
reality. There's
mislead you.
what gets recycled, what is recyclable, and how you do it. And I think we're doing a reasonably good job because we keep them separated. And Casella will tell you what they do. But yes, there's a bunch.
So that's an ask Matt question.
Yeah,
It's also
let's talk
true
about
with-
it.
I think that's also true with paper. People think that 100% of the paper is being recycled, when it really isn't.
A
Yeah,
lot of it
It
is.
depends on the market prices.
yeah,
And cardboard is still the best. Cardboard is heavily recycled because it's worth it. It just is a really, really important one. And metal, of course.
Okay,
I moved us to the second half of the actions, because there's a lot for this one, there's 12. The municipal planting policy, I put further down only because I do think this is actually happening, even though I don't think we have a formal policy, but maybe I could be wrong on that, but our Parks and Forestry Division and Conservation both prioritize planting native, like that's just and same thing with pollinators, that's just like a number one. I don't know that there's something in writing that's pushing that, but that's their goal. So that's why I moved that a little bit further down.
I wonder if the tree committee might address this a little bit too, because I think that, I mean, the town has a preferred planting list.
Yes.
And they're gonna be doing an inventory. And I think maybe there's a way we can tackle some of that.
Yeah, no, I think that will come up, and if we can share that information for private property, but yeah, I think that will be a helpful part of the conversation too. And then I put our food waste program a little bit higher up, only because I have been talking to Matt about the potential for expanding this program. Like, is there a way to have this be easier for drop-offs? I know some people don't like the idea of having to do drop-offs at the RTS, so, and food waste is a significant portion of our waste stream, so I think it's worthwhile
That's
to
where you see all your
continue.
friends.
Yeah.
Is eight go with four?
I think,
Because we talked about landscaping.
yeah, it could go with 4.
So I'm just wondering that that's for individual persons who, you know, or it could involve commercial companies who do landscaping, correct? Or no?
Yeah, it's across the board.
Including the town.
Mhm.
Oh, Erwin?
Isn't, is DPW still promoting the use of recycling bins to residents?
Recycling bins,
Uh,
I don't think they have. any.
They don't.
Compost.
Oh.
They don't have any giveaway now.
Huh?
We used to have them,
Cause I
I
got
don't-
one there.
I don't know if
years
we've
ago.
run out, I can ask Matt.
They,
We've had
unless
them in the
things have changed, they don't
past.
have anymore, but it might have changed. Cause
Yeah.
he'd gotten them through one of the bonus things that they got, and I don't think they have anymore.
Okay.
And you don't actually need a bin if you.
I will
depending
double
what- Where
check.
if you have a house, you know, you may not need a bin.
Yeah,
I
I'll-
need it,
It's
I'll
still
find
helpful.
Oh, it does.
Yeah,
but it will take away what people might object to bringing the food waste to a central location. If more decentralized approach might reach more people.
yeah,
I see a fair number of people doing it, you know, when I'm there dropping off, and because you can drop all food waste off, it's actually pretty nice. So I
yeah,
don't know what Matt's numbers are, I'd be curious.
yeah.
I will find, there's a good article that we put, I'm gonna find the video seems to have vanished, I'll ask Mark to get it back. You can take a look at the Casella video and all the information around it, I will forward it to you, Gabby, to forward to the group.
Okay,
Because we did this, we had this we did this a couple of years ago, but it's a good introduction to what Casella does, what the recycling is, if you're interested.
yeah, that sounds great. Thanks, Michael. I know this one is also ongoing. I know Green Needham has several warrant articles for this town meeting. And I imagine this will just be a constant. The lending libraries, so we do have a lending library at the Needham Public Library. But, and then I've talked to them and with Matt about partnership opportunities, but haven't expanded that conversation outside of that. Unless
There's a swap shop online thing as well.
for
Goods,
the Facebook group,
yeah,
yes,
do a
yeah,
lot of that.
yeah.
That's really kind of an outreach.
Mhm. Yeah. And then,
So you mentioned 9, right? I'm sorry, did you mention 9?
yes, I
Yeah,
said,
okay, sorry,
there's several warrant
Read it.
articles that.
Yeah, because the select board has taken it up from our committee, it was working on it, and they're bringing it forward, so.
Yeah.
We're thrilled.
That's great. The private parcels, I think that this is actually already happening with conservation. Is my understanding that we do have properties that we are keeping an eye on. Just been a question of, do we have enough funding to move on a property? I think we have $1 million like ready to go for purchasing, but that tends to not always be as competitive. But my understanding is that we do keep an eye on this already, so I put it a little lower down the list.
There's some there's some hope to purchase some of the property from the sale of the Foster. the old
Oh,
Foster
yeah.
estate.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
if that ever happens.
I heard a little bit about that from Deb.
Okay,
And then the online resources, so these information about this is available on the
Yeah,
RTS
this goes with the
website, but
RTS education stuff. It's all of a piece.
yeah,
It
so maybe it
belongs
makes sense to
all together.
combine them.
It's just a subset of it.
Does this stuff tie over to your piece of the website, or do you have a link?
I have a link to the RTS page right now through the sustainability webpage. Yeah,
Do you also, we had such problem before you came on board and we were there was an official function, getting the town to like publicize anything that was not a town, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things we asked them to publicize was the recyclopedia that we need to put together, which basically you can look up anything and it tells
Yeah.
you. And we tried to keep it up to date, things that we can.
I thought that was on the RTS.
I don't know,
page,
that's what I was asking, I'm not sure.
but Yeah, I can
I haven't
ask
looked in a
Matt.
while.
That's what I saw there,
But
but-
all that stuff is there, and ways you can do it, how you can recycle it.
Yeah, I can double check on that. And then, yeah, I've included the certification, for pollinator friendly, even large scale solar installations at the end. Only because I think there's a limited amount of
Does
greenfield
the
development for solar, but.
does the RTS Castle qualify?
I'm not sure,
I don't
Might
but
think
be
no, I
it's,
can ask. Yeah,
I don't
I don't think so,
think
because I
it's,
don't,
I mean, I think we would have, when it was built, it would have been, we would have known.
well, it might not have been a.
So what's the benefit of number 13? What do you get out of that? if you
Bees.
get- Huh?
Bees, if you're putting ground mount solar up,
mhm,
to put it in such a way that you can get some benefit out of, from,
As opposed to just putting grass that has to be mowed, you could put stuff that attracts pollinators, which helps the bees and then also
Okay.
reduces the maintenance you need.
So it just has to be put up the right way.
Yeah,
yeah,
Yeah, it's but it's also what you decide to
it's the
plant,
landscape.
the landscaping around it.
Got it.
So this is strictly for ground mounted?
this
Yeah.
is a program,
Yeah,
yeah.
ground mount.
This doesn't say that.
Well,
Mm,
I
yeah,
guess in
sure.
theory, it'd be a little hard to put, I guess you could
That's what
technically
you
have a
mean by
re-roof
medium.
and put it on top, but
Yeah,
no,
that's great.
it's for ground mount.
That'll be cool. Okay, so I'm hearing that some of the education ones need to be combined and that, 3 is gonna get moved up, so it's with 1 and 5 is getting moved up. As well as, 4 and 8, keep 4 and 8 together. Okay. All right,
Okay,
Excellent.
thank you.
yeah,
Good
so
stuff.
now we've gone through all the categories. So I had suggested to Nick, I can try to list in one document what I think are, or what I understand are the top ones across the categories, and then my hope would be at the next meeting, we could have a discussion about what are the top 3 or 4 that we would, committee would want to make a recommendation to the select board on, because we have a lot right now. There's a lot of actions.
Okay,
I think for a number of them, there's also things that we can see that can be done that are not huge amounts of work, but we just will
Yeah,
advance this.
Yeah,
I think that's important.
agreed.
okay. Not too off schedule. Climate
little bit.
funding update.
Yes. All right.
This is a good news story.
Cross your fingers.
Good.
So. Well, so in the annual town meeting warrant, there will hopefully be 2 sustainability related funding items. The first one, we've talked about already before. So this is the Climate Action Program initiatives. So we had originally proposed this as a DSR 5 at 500,000 to help support implementation of the climate action roadmap. The feedback that we got from the finance committee was that they wanted to see a lower dollar amount since this was the first time presenting this, and they wanted to see some more specific information about how funding would be utilized. So this was reduced to 250,000. So this is included right now in the town manager's proposed budget. The source of funding would be free cash. It would still be limited to projects that are within the climate action roadmap. But the proposal would be that this funding would be used for only for only matching funds. So this would be if we were awarded other grants, we could use this to meet a match requirement. That's often a requirement for state and federal grant programs. But the proposal is that we have made a request through a congressional earmark to fund some stormwater treatment and flood mitigation projects. And that was submitted in FY24. We're still waiting to hear what's going to happen with the federal budget. But if awarded that $1.1 million, that we would use this fund to meet the 25% match requirement. So that's the plan for that funding. What is challenging about this is that we don't have a guarantee about which funds we will secure, but we can at least have our priorities in place for if funds are awarded, here's how we would want funds to be spent.
Would this be the Alderbrook project or
So-
other?
So that would be a priority, would be Alderbrook, because that's a project that we have started design on, so we'd be able to move into construction quickly. But there are other priority projects that we've started to identify with our consultant team for stormwater and flood mitigation across town. So there might be places to plug that in as well.
Did FinCon say they would support it now?
No, we have not discussed it with them yet since we reduced the dollar amount. I believe March 12th will be the discussion of that item. But it is included in the proposed budget. The second item, which is still preliminary, there'll have to be a presentation to the select board about this item, is a proposed energy efficiency and clean energy capital program revolving fund, which is a mouthful. This is a revolving fund concept that has become increasingly popular in other communities. In particular, once the investment tax credits, the or clean energy tax credits or elective pay through the Inflation Reduction Act were developed, communities have been establishing these funds because there's a significant amount of money that's coming back from those projects for solar and ground source heat pumps. What's hard about that fund is that you don't know exactly when it's going to come back from the federal government. It can take a little while for the IRS to cut those checks, especially now. But that's been a driving factor in communities establishing those funds is recognizing that there's money coming back that could then be reinvested into other related projects. And so the approach for this would be utilizing state, federal, and utility energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electrification rebates, incentives, and tax credits. So when those funds come back to us for projects that are completed, and then being able to use them for that same bucket of projects, energy efficiency, renewable energy, and electrification. There's a unique quirk of municipal government right now is that we have to establish revolving fund bylaws first in an annual town meeting, and then the following town meeting would be when we would come back for a funding allocation. So unlike that first warrant article I was discussing, like, I couldn't tell you what the funding amount would be for this. We'd have to set that for the following town meeting. But they've been set at different levels in different communities.
But the funding amount that we set for that will be, as with most revolving funds, a maximum amount. It's not determinative of what you put in it. It's
Mhm.
just,
How much you
it
can
can
spend,
accept
yeah,
how much, this much in a year. We've been through
exactly.
that several times with
But-
different revolving funds.
If you get, it's also funded, let's say you get $100,000 back in tax credits or rebates,
Mhm.
that would fund this as well.
Yep,
That is
that's
the source of
exactly
funding
the
for it.
source of funding, yeah.
So, but that has to still be appropriated?
So that, yeah, so every town meeting, a funding amount would be set for what could be spent from that fund.
Okay, so
So town meeting could say, this year the town
you
manager is
can
allowed to
take the money
expend.
in, if the fund is set up and the next week you get a check from Eversource, you can take the money in, you just can't spend it.
Yep, until that
Okay.
until that
Until
allocation
it's
is set for town
appropriated,
meeting,
gotcha.
yeah. So the example for this one, that we've talked about, and I think, helped spur some of this conversation, was the planned addition at
Yeah,
the Cogswell building, because the plan is for that to be a geothermal building, which would qualify for several incentives, including the federal tax credits. And it would be ideal to be able to use those funds to later fund solar on that addition, knowing that right now the solar is considered an ad alternate for that project. It's going to be difficult for us to potentially get some good bids to be able to do solar with the project, but
this is really just, it's about a spending discipline. It's about a direction, because basically all this money is coming back to the town, right? But it's going to the general fund. And the argument, and Hank's made this, we made this argument, we got some energy rebates from Eversource for work we did in the Emery Grover. And if you look at it, if we're getting money from making good energy decisions, let's take that money and spend it on more good energy decisions. And with the revolving fund, you can essentially do that, because otherwise it just goes in the general fund, right? And it's not gonna happen. So this is a way to, maybe not enforce, but basically by putting it in this revolving fund, right? And then the town manager can spend a discussion on these projects. We're basically requiring the town to take the money that we get and spend it on more of this stuff, which to me, I've been arguing for a while, so like Hank has. So I think this is great.
Has FinCom weighed in on this one?
no, this will be presented to the select board, I believe, at a second meeting in
Except for
select,
finance, except for
in
finance
March, and
committee.
then it would go to the select board, or sorry, the finance committee, I believe, in April.
Is it on their radar at all?
It's been, Kate's brought it up in the select board meeting, but there's no language that's been shared yet, but it will.
I would just recommend the sooner that they know this is coming, the better.
Yeah, we definitely want the select board to be obviously solid about it. I can imagine FinCom never likes any of this stuff, okay?
They
Revolving
like
funds,
it, they like
The
it
money
less if
they
they're
get back.
surprised. They like it
The
less if
money
they're
you invest is
surprised.
so little, it's not worth
and
your
this
time.
is not about logic, this is just about the way the FinCom operates.
Right, but they like
Alright.
it less if they're surprised by it.
Right, but they're gonna get a chance to look at it and weigh in on it, but we've had arguments with them about other revolving funds. We have too many revolving funds, it's like.
So, okay, Michael,
But anyway, glad
you,
that's
after
your
dinner.
point. That's your point.
And Barry's not here, so he can't share his opinion on this as our FinCom representative, but these will be presented. I just wanted to keep the committee in the loop about these, so there's no surprises. But these are the items that are being discussed right now.
Should we be weighing in on these as a recommendation in support of them for town meeting? At the climate, or should you ask the climate meeting if we want to support them?
Well, we're not at that point yet, are we?
No, but I'm just asking you, because
Yeah.
it's now March 1st, town meeting's in 2 months. So only if it does make sense, you should think about it and we should discuss it.
Yeah,
not,
let me
That's fine.
think a little bit more about that. 'Cause
Yeah, I
just
don't know.
wanna
I'm
step
not- I
out
don't know the
in
answer.
front
I'm
of
just
the
asking.
other boards and committees, but yeah, that's a good question. Okay. All right. Pull up the sustainability sustainability managers report very quickly. We already talked about the MAPC award. I think the only couple things I'll mention is that we are starting some conversations with staff about our decarbonization roadmap. I expect that will be something that is discussed with the committee, so stay tuned for more on that. And then we did get our scoping audit for Mitchell, which had some great energy efficiency recommendations in it, which we're actually using to help apply for the Green Communities Competitive Grant this spring. We're actually going to Newman tomorrow to do our next assessment for that school, and then Broad Meadows is the following plan. And then for adaptation, we have started conversations with the Office of Coastal Zone Management about applying for construction funds for the project that they funded for design. So I anticipate we will put in for that later this year. And the only other one I mentioned is that we are beginning the process of organizing a flood preparedness workshop in partnership with Charles River Watershed Association and crew. Since I wrote this, it has now been scheduled for Monday, March 31st. It is going to be during the day, though. It's going to be at Center at the Heights. It's going to be from 3 to 4:30. So there'll be information about flooding in Needham and the watershed, and then like individual actions that homeowners can take for
So it's open to
preparedness.
everyone.
Sorry about
So
that.
it's open to everyone.
It's open to everyone, yep. So this one's gonna be during the day in person, but we are talking about organizing another one that'll be virtual in the evening.
So it's not gonna be filmed.
This one will not be recorded, no. But again, we are gonna do another one planned for later this spring that will be virtual, recorded and in the evening.
I think those will be very popular.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think so too.
It'll be at the senior center?
Yes, yeah, Center at the Heights, 3 to 4:30 PM on March 31st. Any questions on?
I want to
anything?
go on the record again as thanking you for being here, because all these are,
Thanks,
a
Michael.
lot of these are things that weren't getting done because there's nobody to focus on until you came aboard. So thank you.
Thanks, appreciate that.
Second.
Yeah, team effort. Thank you.
And we take full credit for bringing you here.
Yeah, it's a great group.
let's see.
Yeah, back to you, Nick.
Updates on any related committees? Oh, sorry.
I'm trying to get the day of the week. Is that a Sunday?
That is a Monday. March 31st is a Monday. April 1st is a Tuesday
For the flood.
for the flood preparedness workshop. Yep.
Yeah, all right, it works then.
So related working group and committees, I think that the main one was the news on the tree committee. I'm glad that it's finally
Yeah.
kicking off.
Fantastic.
Mhm.
Exciting.
Any other,
Yeah. Schools, PPC, anything else? Sure. No.
You got it covered.
we added this as a standing agenda item, just because we have a lot of related things going
I'd
on.
say, things are in the move forward with the power,
Mm,
so.
yes.
And the state building board really respects and appreciates the way you do it. So
I was glad to
that's
hear
great.
that.
It's looking good as far as
So we have
the
to,
little that we'll get.
Mm,
Nice.
Things look
Good.
good.
so a long way to go, but yeah, we're gonna do we'll put together the education plan, which goes to them, and will affect hopefully the design, and we'll see.
The Conservation Commissioners Conference was Saturday, and I heard a couple of people speak about the new executive order that accelerates the permitting and siting process. So I can give you a quick summary in an email.
That would be great.
That might be enough
Yeah.
to hear about.
Thank you, Fred.
They're gonna be looking for anything under 25 megawatts is gonna be reviewed at the local level with a cap of 12 months to decide on applications. And they're gonna be looking for a lot of input from local communities on how that application, what information we look for in the application. So.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Any other issues? Great. Motion to adjourn?
So move. Second.
Okay, in favor, Fred?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Carolyn?
I,
Bye.
And I. So we are adjourned.
thank you.
Okay, thanks everyone.
When's our next meeting?
Have a good night.
Next meeting is